All right, I had to start again. Got disconnected. We reached the maximum recording of one video. So here's the follow-up. We're going to try to get through this. We were talking about martial law, military law, reversionary interest. Now remember, the objectives of martial law, the Lieber Code, the objectives of the military's occupation on foreign soil is: one, to protect the public property and to seize all the public property, to identify the belligerents from the peaceful inhabitants, and to make the provisions of peace so that the occupation can go back to the normal civil order of things. Now we're going to talk about the Trading with the Enemy Act, which is codified at 12 U.S.C. 95A2. The Trading with the Enemy Act is military policy enacted by Congress, right? So we can have a more fine-tuned understanding of what's going on here in the United States with their policy, right? So the Lieber Code and the general orders was to give us the general overview of what the military's purpose is under occupation. We talked about the sequestering, which is basically escrowing the funds from the estate of the American people to pay off foreign creditors or whatever. Now we're going to talk about the Trading with the Enemy Act, which is the specific legislation passed by the Congress of the United States that we need to be paying attention to, because this act is going to show us how to identify the peaceful inhabitants as well as the belligerents. It's also going to show us where our remedy is in regard to the property, which is basically the receipt that we're holding on to, which is the certificate of live birth. And it's gonna and we're gonna also talk about something else in there. Oh, the provisions of peace. So I'm gonna read the Trading with the Enemy Act, 12 U.S.C. 95A2. It reads, pay close attention: any payment, conveyance, transfer, assignment, or delivery of property or interest therein made to or for the account of the United States, or otherwise directed pursuant to this section, or any rule, regulation, instruction, or direction issued hereunder, shall to the extent thereof be a full acquittance and discharge for all purposes of the obligation of the person making the same, and no person shall be held liable in any court for or in respect to anything done or omitted in good faith in connection with the administration of, or in pursuance of, and in reliance on this section, or any regulation, instruction, or direction issued hereunder. That was like a long, extended, complex sentence. Maybe they made it that long to confuse you, but I'm going to simply state what it says, and then you can go and read over it and over it again until it permeates, until you understand it. Right? Basically what it says is 12 U.S.C. 95A2. Anybody that assigns property over to the United States in a transaction for the purpose of discharging an obligation, anybody that does that, and references is 12 U.S.C. 95A2, the officer that receives that is supposed to discharge the obligation, discharge that person's obligations, and hold that person harmless, and that person shall not be tried or held liable in any court whatsoever. So what does that let you know? That lets you know that this is talking about a specific remedy that you can use when you're being held as a surety, or when you're being held as a liable party in some type of court matter. Reading this again, it basically says anyone who negotiates value to the United States to discharge any type of obligation and references this citation, that matter is supposed to be discharged, and that individual is supposed to be held harmless. There's your remedy, right? Now, there's your remedy for impersonal claims against the person, because remember, the impersonal claim is to escrow funds from the estate, is to create a form of quasi money in the commercial jurisdiction, because real money doesn't exist in the commercial jurisdiction. But what is money in the commercial jurisdiction? It's the negotiation of interests, right, on securities and negotiable paper. So when they're making an impersonal claim against the John Alex Doe agency, you holding that certificate with the title, you have the title, that's the affidavit of beneficial ownership, instead of chasing the rainbow, trying to find out where the money is in this thing, if that's what they're after, they're creating money through the facilitation of commerce and admiralty and 14th Amendment persons, then take that certificate, that security, flip it over on the back, and assign the reversionary interest. Again, what is the reversionary interest? That's the asset that is due based on the obligations that was created. You don't have to know what the value is, but you know that it's accounted for, and that receipt represented. So any obligation, you flip it over and you assign the interest paid to the order of the United States without recourse. You negotiate it to the order of the United States, put it in the hands of that officer to discharge the obligation and hold you harmless under the provisions of 12 U.S.C. 95A2. This is what Boris and Jim Hebben and them spoke about when they talked about completing the usufruct. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit too. And I think I hit the blunt of all of this. So I'm pretty much really done. I'm just going to kind of fine tune it and just go through a couple of other things, read some more things under the Lieber Code, so you really have a better idea of what's going on. But we pretty much just talked about your potential remedy, 12 U.S.C. 95A2. That's your commercial remedy. It's the same as Public Law 7310, HJR 192, but it's more current and up to date and deals specifically with the current state of things right now under martial law. Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to go ahead and read 12 U.S.C. 95A2 one more time, then I'm just going to continue reading with what I've written here. 12 U.S.C. 95A2 reads, any payment, conveyance, transfer, assignment, or delivery of property or interest therein made to or for the account of the United States, or as otherwise directed pursuant to this section, 12 U.S.C. 95A2, or any rule, regulation, instruction, or direction issued hereunder, shall to the extent thereof be a full acquittance and discharge for all purposes of the obligation of the person making the claim. It says making the same. And no person shall be held liable in any court or in any respect to anything done or admitted in good faith in connection with the administration of or in pursuance of and in reliance on this section or any rule, regulation, instruction, direction issued hereunder. See, by assigning the reversionary interest, you're bringing the remedy. You're showing that you're not a combatant. You're what's called as completing the usufruct. You're saying you want the property, you want the money, here, you can have it, right? Release the body, because the body is not the surety. They're proceeding in personam against the name. Remember, the name has nothing to do with any living man or woman, right? But if you're showing up, you're obviously the surety or the administrator or something. You see what I'm saying? So as the administrator, as the executor for the estate, pay the debt, flip it over, assign that interest, to discharge in full acquittance. Give me 1 second. Let me pause for a moment. Okay, usufruct. Usufruct is the right of enjoying a thing, the property of which is vested in another, and to draw from the same all profit, utility, and advantage which it may produce, provided it be without altering the substance of a thing. Let me read that one more time. The usufruct is the right of enjoyment of a thing, of which is vested in another. So the birth certificate is a receipt of something that you're the owner of. That's why the affidavit of beneficial ownership is there, but it's vested in another because you don't have that thing, right? And to draw, the property of which is vested in another, and to draw from the same all the profit, utility, and advantage which it may produce, provided it be without altering the substance of a thing. So here's some things about usufructuary. One who has the right and enjoyment of a usufruct, the duties of the usufructuary are, and I think I got these from iamsomedude.com. Maybe I got those from I think that's Boris's or Jim Haben, one of their sites. I really don't know. So the duties of the usufructuary are: 1, to make an inventory of the things subject to the usufruct in the presence of those having an interest in them. So if the military occupation is holding property in abeyance, a usufructory relationship results as an operation of law. So they have certain duties and obligations of how they have to maintain the property and how they can use the property. And as we already learned, they can't use it for personal or private gain, right? So let's see. And if they're going to use the property, they have to give security for the restitution. Actually, I'm not going to kind of go into this because, but I will say they're responsible for paying the taxes when they use the property. They're responsible for providing an inventory. They're responsible for submitting a bond. You have to know these things because when you get more advanced under what's going on commercially, you can use your knowledge of these things when somebody brings an impersonal claim against the estate to make sure that these officers under the military martial law and under the rules of usufruct are doing what they're required to do, which none of them are going to be doing, or even if they are doing and you become competent and you know this stuff, you're going to shut the thing down because, they can't proceed if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So that's all I really have. But now I'm just going to read through a couple of other provisions in the Lieber Code. Article 38, private property unless forfeited by crimes, right? Or by offenses of the owner, which is another reason why you don't want to be a belligerent or a combatant, because you're going to forfeit your rights to even whatever interest is being held for you. You see what I'm saying? So private property, unless forfeited by crimes of the offenses of the owner, can be seized only by the way of military necessity for the support or other benefit of the Army of the United States. If the owner has not fled, the commanding officer will cause receipts to be given. That's your birth certificate, which may serve the spoliated owner to obtain indemnity, right? That's under Article 38. They're saying the owner will receive a receipt for this property that's held in abeyance, and that receipt will allow that owner to be indemnified. Indemnification, that's only for the peaceful inhabitants. What is indemnification? That means to be held harmless. Same thing that we read in 12 USC 95A2. Anybody that tenders value, you flip that receipt over, you negotiate that security on the back onto or for the account of the United States, you're supposed to be held harmless, not only of the provisions of the Trading with the Enemy Act, but even under Article 38 of the Lieber Code, which says this receipt is given to the owner so he can obtain indemnity. He can be held harmless. Let's see. Now, and there's some more stuff on here about completing the usufruct. I'm not going to go into that because I don't want to make this any longer. Commanding generals may cause the magistrates and civil officers of the hostile country to take oaths. We talked about that. That's the second oath. That's Article 26. Under Article 34 of the Lieber Code, as a general rule, the property belonging to churches, hospitals, and other establishments of exclusive charitable character or establishments of education or foundations for the promotion of knowledge, whether public schools, universities, academies, blah, 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 blah. All of that stuff is not to be considered public property, meaning it's not to be seized in the sense of paragraph 31, but it may be taxed or used when the public requirements. So you see they have provisions for educational institutions, churches, religious organizations, and things like that. You also see that same provision written into the IRS code. The point I'm trying to make is it's a little bit out of the scope of this video, but the agency identified on the birth certificate created by the United States of America, it is also an association because that birth certificate has a couple of different parties on it. It's association. It's an unincorporated association. So as you get more knowledgeable of that and you start to learn how to set up your commercial affairs properly, by the way, we have a lot of template articles for that under the commercial matrix for the premium members that pay $25 a month. But as you begin to learn that, you know, the commercial side of things, you as an association or an unincorporated association, before you can really operate properly civilly, you need to set that commercial vessel up the right way. Your corporation's commercial code will tell you that. So you have to start researching an unincorporated association, why it's important to have articles of association to bring that corporation into the proper status so it can prosecute and defend and it can have civil rights. Because right now your association, your unincorporated association, is considered civilly dead because you haven't properly incorporated, you haven't properly filed article of association, etc., right? But reason why I'm saying this is because those advanced students that want to start really setting themselves up commercially, when you realize that, hey, I've been operating this association that's unincorporated, and you begin to put your articles of incorporation so you can operate properly and now have civil rights for that trust, then you want to make sure that the purpose is probably for spiritual uplifting, education, research, and all the things that have been provisioned to be left alone, like the IRS, religious auxiliary organizations. You want to start conducting your affairs in such a way to keep yourself off limits. I hope that makes sense. So, and you will even see we've taken that in consideration with our Declaration of Trust and our Articles of Association. Everything we're doing is not for profit. Technically, we can't create a profit because there is no more profit, right? There is no more money under the jurisdiction from which we're coming from. Anyways, let's see. Article 37, the United States acknowledges and protects in hostile... Article 37, Lieber Code. The United States acknowledge and protect in hostile countries occupied by them, religion and morality. See, these are the things that they're supposed to protect. Strictly private property. The persons of the inhabitants, especially those of women, and the sacredness of domestic relations. Offenses to the contrary shall be punished. So this is good for, Moorish Americans, those whose religion practice is Islam. I'm not saying that it's automatically good on the surface. What I'm saying is these are the angles that you have to go in and educate yourself so that you know how to operate and navigate. Article 38, private property. We already said that unless you're a belligerent, you can lose that private property. Otherwise, it's supposed to be protected. 42, right? We're talking about, again, the military law, the martial law. This is an oversight jurisdiction over the whole commercial jurisdiction. Slavery under Article 42 of the Lieber Code is not, slavery complicating and confounding the ideas of property, that is, of a thing, and of personality, that is, of humanity, exists according to municipal and local. Bottom line, read Article 42 of the Lieber Code. Slavery is not tolerated, basically. The law of nature and nations has never... that's basically what it says in Article 42. The law of nations and nature has never acknowledged slavery. The digest of the Roman law enacts the early dictum of the pagan jurists that so far that the law of nature is concerned, all men are equal. Fugitives escaping from a country in which they were slaves, villains, or serfs into another country have for centuries past been held free and acknowledged free by judicial decisions. Basically, under the military jurisdiction, in those federal courts, they are not supposed to acknowledge and they are not supposed to support slavery. You can some way kind of find a way to use that into your advantage. Number 45 of the Lieber Code. All captures and booty belong, according to the modern law of war, primarily to the government of the captor. Prize money, whether on the sea or land, can only be claimed under the local law. There you go. It tells you right there, all prize money, everything that's secured, held in abeyance, is basically going to be held and it's going to be owned by the government. But, of course, that you have that receipt for the purpose of claiming an interest. But that has to be done under local laws. So now that lets you know when you start really thinking about redemption and going after this reversionary interest or whatever you may be entitled to do that, you're going to have to deal with your local law. So you want to start looking at your local codes, affidavits of beneficial ownership in the county, your local comptroller of the currency. That's where you want to do your research. The claims are made on the local level. So it's going to happen starting with what's recorded in your county, right? And then we're going to go up to your state and then we're almost done. We got about, let's see. Actually, no, we're gonna end that. We're gonna be just done talking about that for the most part. But what I really wanted you to understand from this part of the video is that, all property is held in abeyance. And that receipt that you call a birth certificate is the receipt for some property that is not in your possession. So we can rightfully assume that that property is held in abeyance. When somebody makes an impersonal claim against the John Alex Doe person, they are trying to facilitate commerce and they're trying to create money. In persona means they're going after the account or the accountability, because all the money is just nothing more than accounting. They're going after the account of that person. That account is held in abeyance. That's the same account that you've been chasing with Treasury Direct and all these other, things. But you have the receipt for that. So flip it over and negotiate it in accordance with the provisions of 12 U.S.C. 95A2 to discharge any obligation, whether commercial, criminally, or civilly, in full abeyance, right? And yeah, I was gonna say that we may put a template of that online, but I'm not gonna put a template of that because that's advanced. So that's for the advanced students. Just basically gave it to you. All right, so man, that was a lot to get through. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, again, join the premium subscription group. Pay the $25 a month because you got all this. But the next, there's about three other videos that I'm going to be coming with. The next video, we're going to be talking about potential remedies for people dealing with foreclosure issues. We're going to talk about an administrative procedure that you would do first to set yourself up. And then we're going to talk about taking a legal action, whether it's suing your debt collector under the FDCPA or filing a quiet title action, which I think is probably one of the most strongest things that we should be looking for. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to also put the section on the site that talks about commercial liens. So we're going to put some videos out there that talks about commercial liens, how to create them, and we're going to kind of go through some of that and put some templates there. So we're going to go through the foreclosure stuff. We're going to get back on the commercial lien and some enforcement, how to get these oath of offices, how to get the policies. And the other thing that we're going to also talk about again is we're going to go revisit the things that deal with fighting corruption, how to get use the Freedom of Information Act to get their insurance policies and their bonds and their oaths of office, because that is probably something that's going to be necessary, because now that we're getting competent and we understand the rules of the military jurisdiction, what they can do, what they're not supposed to do, you got to get further studied up in admiralty, in personam, in rem claims, how that stuff operates. So once you know how they're supposed to operate under the common law, how they're supposed to operate in commerce, and we got these things, then we want to know about what is our, how can we enforce? Because you absolutely want to make sure you know what you're doing before you get into enforcement. Because if you start trying to enforce on somebody you haven't done a due diligence, it can come back and blow up in your face. But that's not going to happen. We ain't going to let that happen to any of us here. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're learning something. Visit www.thctrust.org. Create your free account and enjoy the resources. Thank you again. Peace. Hotep.